Well, greetings everybody and welcome to another live. Loads of people waiting to join, so you'll all be charging in now. Loads and loads of questions, so I will try and get into the questions as quickly as I possibly can. And so for the next 60 minutes, I will attempt to answer as many questions as I possibly can. And thanks so much to so many people joining. So let's do a quick few housekeeping bits and pieces. I'm Gary Bembridge. I guess you know that because you're here. The channel's Tips for Travelers. I always get that wrong way around because it's kind of mirrors. Tips for Travelers. Helping you to kind of make cruising right. If you're asking a question, it's really helpful if you write the word question, ideally in capitals, beforehand, because it makes it so much easier for me to spot the questions in the chat. So let me just see if we've got any other bits and pieces. Just a reminder that in 2 weeks today, some of you, I know some of you are in here, will be joining me on my very first group cruise, which is this top one there, the Holland America one. And then obviously there's the September, I'm still doing it wrong, the September one, which is on Celebrity as well. So the September one is pretty much closed, although theoretically it's possible to get on that. It's selling very full, the prices are kind of high, so that's actually kind of, it's a lot of people, it's become less appealing to. But anyway, so next week there will be a live, hopefully the first one before the group cruise, and then we'll talk a little bit next week about the group cruise and bits and pieces I'm going to be doing on that. So let's get stuck into the questions. So many questions, and I want to try and get through as many of those as I possibly can. And there's a couple of people here who actually seeing a lot of me this week. Last night we had our members, captain level patron and members chat. So like Jim and Chris were part of that, and a few other people joining. So anyway, enough of that. Let's get into the questions. Warren asking the question, and it's very fancy that some people do that little fancy thing with the little, I'm not sure what they're called, brackety things. I'm sure there's a proper name for them. Have you ever used a ship's medical center? Have you considered doing a video on medical centers? What's available and what's not, and cost in capital letters? Yes, plus types of insurance. So, Warren, I haven't. Have I ever used a medical center? Yes, I have. I used it on Queen Victoria when we were doing our big 7-week trip. I got a really stinking kind of sore, cold and sore, really bad sore throat. So I did use the medical center. But you're right, because I knew it was one of those ones that you could probably going to need antibiotics for. And it is kind of expensive, but it is sort of, in the UK, of course, we're used to the National Health Service where you don't pay to go to see a doctor. So for a lot of people, particularly from the UK, and I guess other countries which have National Health Service kind of stuff, it is a bit of a shock paying, but it's kind of more private healthcare. So if you're going private in the UK, it's kind of equivalent cost. Most of the medical centers will put a price list outside, or they will have it in the desk there. So I haven't actually thought about doing one on medical centers. I've sort of woven it into various bits and pieces. I haven't thought about doing a specific dive, so maybe that it might be worth doing, because what's very important on medical insurance is in most cases you can claim on if you've got medical insurance. So they would give me a statement which was appropriate for applying for claiming back. I didn't actually claim back on that because one of the things I always sort of is if I claim it wasn't that much, it's maybe like $60 or something, is that going to make my premiums next year the higher? One of the most interesting things is if you ever do a behind the scenes tour, many of the cruise lines will take you to the medical center. And of course, the most asked question that they get asked is what happens if someone dies on board? And they will normally tell you that there is a morgue on board. Contrary to popular belief and rumors and stuff people talk about, if there's a big ice cream event, it means that someone's died and they've cleared out the ice cream. That is one of those urban myths. There is specifically kind of space to hold bodies, which is a little bit no one really wants to know about. They won't tell you where they are, but they do. Most of the doctors you can normally quietly, they'll admit that. The other really important thing with medical centers is they always make the point that the role of the medical center now is to stabilize. And if you have an issue, to get you off the ship as quickly as possible, which is why you'll sometimes see the medevacs and the helicopters coming in and people being disembarked. They do have some capability to do x-rays. They're normally done digitally and sent for someone to look at on land. So that is quite interesting in terms of what they do. Now, way back when, right back in the 1930s and so on, when you had things like Queen Mary, if you've ever done a tour of Queen Mary in Long Beach, you actually see they were able to do much more. They could do much more medical stuff. Important as well is they don't do any dental stuff. That's probably more than you want to know, but thanks for that suggestion, Warren. Good to see you. Now, Gregory has a question, which I saw just before the live, and I didn't get a chance to double check on this. So Viking Vesta is symbol to Athens. Now, what's important to know for people is Viking have always had ships of 900 passengers, and every ship is the same. They are introducing this new ship, which is carrying more guests. So I don't know yet, Gregory. I haven't looked at the deck plans for it, so I don't know the answer to that yet. But because that was my first question, are they actually just adding, like they do say on some of the ships like Beyond and stuff, where they increased the length slightly, but in reality just added another deck? So I'm not 100% sure on that, but I will kind of check that. Peter, it seems to me that it's harder to find bargains than before COVID. Absolutely 100%. And the most cruises are now full. You're absolutely right. If you look at if you follow, which I do because I'm geeky like that, if you follow the statements, the quarterly reports from Carnival Corporation, Royal Caribbean Group, and the Norwegian Group, they are selling on average between 103 and 104% across the whole fleet. So you're right, most ships are selling full. Now, obviously, it varies a little bit on the region and stuff like that, Caribbean more so, and so on. Most of them are full. So it is going to be a challenge. I get asked this a lot. I am more pessimistic about it changing, simply because although there's quite a bit of capacity coming, cruising is growing really, really fast as a travel option. And the cruise lines are spending a lot of money. If you also look at those financial statements, they're spending dramatically more in marketing, heavily targeted at first-time cruisers, families. And so the demand is growing, I feel like, even faster than that. So I think it's going to be more of a challenge. One of the things that I have noted, by the way, Peter, is one of the times to look is at the end of a quarter. So I've noticed, for example, as we head towards the end of March, in the run-up to kind of Easter and stuff, Easter weekend, is quite a lot of the lines are selling, doing like flash sales, like 1-day sales, 2-day sales, weekend sales. And I'm assuming that's because they're hitting quarterly targets. I don't know if that's just a guess. So but you're right, overall, it's different. Peter also asked a question about Ben and David with being stopped filming. They weren't actually kicked off the ship. They were stopped filming. They decided to leave the ship. So I did a little video when that happened, which I did for channel members and patrons, because I didn't want to go too big and public on that whole thing. But I do talk a little bit about what I do, but I'll give you a couple of quick headlines. So I've never been asked to stop filming on a ship to date. It is one thing that I'm very aware could happen. I'm more worried from a passenger perspective. So no, even on our last cruise, there was some, maybe I won't mention about the channel, but they were just, filming in a space, and people were asking what they're doing, why are you filming here, kind of thing. So one of the things I sometimes do, particularly with people, I will almost overcompensate, showing that I'm filming over there versus people there. I do lots of trying to film people from behind, that kind of stuff. So you have to be very sensitive. I also use very small equipment. I know Ben and David talk about the equipment they use. I use like my phone occasionally. I use an Osmo Pocket 3, very small. But the other thing that I do is I tend to tell the ship if I'm going to be able, sort of more informally than anything else, so that they sort of know that I'm around. And that I talk in that little video that I did a little bit about how I do that, but it's not it's more informal, so they kind of know that I'm doing stuff. But no, I haven't. But I do think it's going to become a bigger issue. Terry, who I met on Vista, my recent Vista cruise, with some great tips, particularly showing some great tips around status matching with particularly between casinos, My Vegas app. It's very interesting, Terry, because Mark, my partner Mark, goes to Vegas quite a lot for the last couple of weekends because he's been working in the US. And he was talking, he was actually looking at the different status levels and making the point that on the MGM rewards at I think you have to get gold, it's a gold level you get to, he was seeing that if he gets a gold, he gets a free cruise. So that's magic. Anyway, what's the most challenging weather you've experienced on a cruise? Tell us a scary story. So it's interesting, actually. Last night we were talking about this on the captain's patron kind of Zoom call as well, around seasickness and rough seas. There's two that I'll talk about very briefly. I mean, there are parts of the world which are renowned for having rougher seas. Drake Passage, if you're into Antarctica, is one. Heading around, Cape Horn is another one, and obviously crossing the North Atlantic in winter is another one example. I know there's some also down near Australia. So the most challenging weather that I've faced was very early in my cruising career when we did a transatlantic winter crossing on the QE2, and it was very, very rough. The waves were coming over the front of the ship. The ship was all over the place, and it was also quite. I never experienced that before, but what I discovered is that we went to dinner, and it was really empty. And we discovered that across the ship, in all the restaurants, less than 30% of people went to dinner that night, and you literally had to walk kind of up and down with the movement of the ship. It was that rough. I think the other time was on my last Drake Passage crossing there on Penarth. We had really, really rough seas, everything all over the place and flying around and whatnot. Like we had to do on QE2, we took drawers out of the side, bedside things, because they were flying all over the place. But I've never really felt scared doing that, and luckily, touch wood, I've never been seasick. So those are probably my two scariest there. Hetty's here, about to go to the Zeta Dam and the Seychelles. Very nice. Real villain. Okay. What do you think is the perfect number of days for a first-time cruise? We want to maximize our trip, and also in the case of seasickness on the first cruise, don't want it to be too long. So, real villain, I do recommend, if you're going on a first cruise, I would still do kind of a 6 or 7 nighter for a couple of reasons. One of which is you get to really experience the whole cruise experience. You have time to explore the ship, to try the different activities. If you want to do specialty dining, to try the different dining options, to do the different activities, to see the shows. Also, if you're going, depending on where you're going to see the different ports, get out and about and explore. So I tend to encourage people to do that. Now, taster cruises used to be the thing where you could go on a 2 or 3 nighter. They've kind of, in my view, shifted away from their intention. They've become often party cruises. They often don't attract who you're normally going to get on. So, for example, we used to take my mum and my mother-in-law quite a lot on Cunard on those little short trips, but we stopped going because actually it wasn't a typical Cunard experience, because the people were going because they wanted to see the Cunard ships, want to get a little taste of Cunard, but it wasn't a true experience. So, and they don't necessarily run all the activities on ships. So I do encourage you to go for those 7 days. I wouldn't worry too much about the seasickness side. Just be prepared. Take some motion sickness pills or the wristbands, and just be prepared. But I would encourage you to go sort of on a regular sort of sized cruise, if that's the right way of doing it. Matthew, do you pay for your cruises in full after making the initial deposit, or do you have the payment plans and to pay towards your cruises each month? So Matthew, this is a great question, because I do it probably differently to, I know a lot of people maybe do. Maybe I'm not so different, actually. I used to pay quite far ahead. What I tend to do now is, I pay the deposit, and then I will sometimes kind of drip pay, if you like, because I have many, I've got across a year, I'm maybe doing 10 cruises or something. So I'm always balancing kind of cash flow and money and trying to make sure that what I'm paying is doing. So what I tend to do is I like to sort of pay stuff off down, as it were. But I tend to then pay the final amount now closest to the final time. Now, it depends a little bit, again, Matthew, whether you're going direct with the cruise line or through travel agents. So, for example, I book all my cruises through travel agent Sarah, travel counselors. So actually, when I pay my cruise, I have a deadline to pay, which is slightly before the final payment date, and they then pay off the cruise. They have a schedule where they pay off the cruise. One of the reasons for that is that I always would keep a small amount aside. There is an argument, although it's less of an argument now, but when fares were coming down more than going up, often you would then try and get a bit of fare matching. So if you hadn't paid the final balance, there was more flexibility for the cruise line to either maybe give you a lower fare, or maybe to you had more of a negotiation, I guess. When you pay the final balance, cruise lines were less likely to do some of the fare matching stuff because they didn't want to physically refund you. So I don't do that, but I do sort of have my own payment plan. Now I know some cruise lines, if you're going directly, will let you set up a payment plan, but I like to sort of, I love spreadsheets. I have a spreadsheet where I slowly work down and I've worked out when I want to pay off all of those. So it's probably a long way of answering your question, and it's probably more about what I do. But hopefully that helps. Jean, what are your thoughts on a transatlantic on Oceania Vista, 2 smaller ship daily activities? So Jean, I mean, I think it's a good challenge because I think one of the things you need to think about if you're doing a transatlantic, the repositioning cruise, is what are you really doing it for? So certainly on Vista, the daily program is pretty light. So even on sea days, it's fairly light daily program. In fact, the video that I've recorded, the video just needs to be edited and stuff about Oceania Vista, is the point that the daily program is pretty light. The real Oceania experience is around the small ship experience. You're right, depending on which, Vista, it's 1,200 passengers. It's about so it's about the small ship experience. It's about the food. It's about the enrichment. So you've got the library, the talks, the cooking demo, the cooking classes, the artists in residence kind of stuff. But you're not going to have a lot of things to do. There's not a lot of different venues to go to. You can go to afternoon tea every day if you want, but the entertainment is very so. The evening entertainment is very classic stuff. But if you're going because you want to chill, relax, and you're happy to do your own thing, then yes. But if you're looking for lots of busy activities to do, then I would avoid it, because you're basically going to have trivia every day. You're going to have maybe some deck games. You can collect your big O points. So but if you're happy to entertain yourself, chill out most of the day, then I think absolutely it's an option. I have a whole other issue with Oceania Vista that I won't talk about, that I've spoken about before and not covered in my video. Mark, hi there, good to see you again. You mentioned in your MSC Yacht Club video the guests were bringing non-Yacht Club passengers, presumably family members, into the Yacht Club. Do you know this is a regular occurrence? So Mark, I've heard mixed things on this. I mean, theoretically, you're not supposed to. And if you actually look at the kind of the terms and conditions, or whatever the word is, you're not supposed to bring in anybody in. But the family and people that I saw, they would basically kind of not put pressure, but they would basically say the concept, I'm bringing people in for whatever, and they kind of let them. They didn't really push back on it. And I have seen other people being on MSC Yacht Club talking about how they have seen that, but theoretically, no. So I think probably a lot of it's going to hinge around how assertive the concierge team is. I think they're probably, my experience has been, they probably don't want to confront passengers. I think if they're bringing them all the time, the same people in all the time, but it seems to be fairly regular, but theoretically not. Terry, just talking about the food on Vista was good. I also enjoyed Ember. Ember, for those people who don't know, is a new concept on Oceania. On Marina Riviera, they have Jacques, which is their French restaurant, linked to Jacques Pepin, who was their big culinary guy. He's sort of taken more step back. Recently, they've announced some new people who sort of work with him. So in terms of food, I mean, Terry, if you need to sort of keep going up, if you like. So once you get into Regent, which is their sister line, their ultra luxury, Silver Sea, Seabourn, those kind of lines, have that kind of level of food. So I would say at that sort of level they are with the Azamara, Windstar stuff. I do think that Oceania has an edge over those. You kind of need to go up to the next grade. Fairly similar, I guess, probably, fairly similar. You probably, Azamara and stuff is fairly similar. I mean, they have some of the same concepts, but you do need to, in my view, if you want to get that sort of level, you do need to kind of go up. So look, so we got a little super chat there. Gary Remages, #2 fan. Hi there. What's the best way for a New York couple who travel light from Southampton to London, National Express or train? Can you walk to both stations from the board? Well, thanks very much for that super chat. So basically, the easiest, I mean, I think in reality, the easiest way, what I tend to do is I use the train. You can't walk from any of the terminals, because there's 4 terminals now at Southampton. None of them are really walking distance. One of them is at a push, you probably could walk, but you really need to get a taxi. The taxis do grumble a bit because, of course, it's quite a short fare there and back. It's a little bit frustrating that the cruise lines don't always have a shuttle to the train station, but I'm guessing it's because the taxis put pressure on them. So I do think the train is in many ways the easiest. You go straight into Waterloo. Then in Waterloo, you've got the tube system that you can jump on. Now, you're right, there are some bus options. Many of the cruise lines, depending on which cruise line you're with, will offer a bus transfer. Normally, though, to Heathrow Airport a lot. But then from Heathrow Airport, you can the Elizabeth line or the metro. But I would say the train is great. The train is pretty quick. That's what I use when I'm heading backwards and forwards to London, Southampton. If I'm by myself, if I'm doing a Southampton with Mark, we'd probably drive and park. But normally I would use a train. In many ways, it's often quicker. So the train would be my tip. You just jump in a taxi. Taxi is maybe £6 or £7. So it's probably about $10 or something like that. They sometimes a bit grumbly, but they have to do it. Now there is Ubers in Southampton, but I believe there's some kind of issue with Ubers coming in and stuff. So the taxis are the best option. There's always loads of taxis. Sorry, I jumped a question there. So let's quickly go. See the World have a cruise on MSC in June. First in a mass market line. Are the specialty restaurants worth the money? The specialty restaurants are pretty okay on MSC. I find that the main dining, the stuff food is less good, and particularly on the big ships, they often you might be allocated one very late. So I found them pretty good actually. And when I was on MSC, even though I was in Yacht Club, I did a couple of the specialities. I think they are pretty good. And they do some quite good packages. So yes. Lady Golfer, good to see you here again. Do you use a yearly insurance policy? Does it cover all preconditions? If so, what do you use? We're paying almost $1,800 each for 24 days in the marina. Allianz, and it seems really high. So insurance is always a difficult one because insurance is incredibly local. So I often get asked around making a video around insurance, and I sort of put it off a little bit because it is so local, and even in some places, it's sometimes even regional. I discovered talking to Canadian people that there's even differences based on which province they're in. So, but I'll answer your question as best I can. So I do have a yearly insurance policy, mainly because I travel almost every month. So that's very important. Also, I have pre-existing conditions with my, being in remission from cancer. So I need to have that. It's quite hard to have that. And I use a company now. The problem is I use a company in the UK, and I switch between StaySure and AllClear because some years they've been the other. But my annual policy is about the same as you are paying with my remission from cancer, which is obviously a condition which people are a bit skittish about covering, is about the same in pounds, converted to about the same for an annual policy. So so that does seem very high. And it covers medical, it covers cancellation up to $5,000, about $8,000, $10,000. It covers a lot of stuff. It's got cruise cover, so it would cover if I was Medivac, all that kind of stuff. Now, Allianz, I know, is a very popular one to use. One of the things that Doug of Cruise Radio suggests, he talks about using tripinsurance.com. That's one of his kind of partners, and they do some price comparison stuff, as I understand, in the US. I did a post recently, and I'm trying to think where I put it, where there was a couple of suggestions. One of my videos recently, and what I will do is I'd spoken to a whole lot of people in the US, and there was 4 different companies they used. So maybe I will try and pull those links out and put them in the notes of this. But if people have other suggestions, that would be great. Richard and Diana calling all ports. Good to see you here. I've been like, yeah, it's been a little bit manic, really busy catching up. Mark arrived back. He's been away in the US working, so he actually arrived back this afternoon. So that was very exciting. And then I'm heading off just in a week. So thanks very much. And I was actually, as a little aside, I was on Bill Panoff's from Port Magazines live on Friday, and Calling All Ports joined there. And thanks for joining. And I've put on, if you ever wanted, that we sort of interviewed a bit about the channel in the background and stuff. And I've put that in the community tab if anyone has seen enough of that. Jeffrey from Cruising for One's here. Fraser's here. Great to see you up in Scotland. Hope it's not too chilly and cold. GG Stevo's here. Andrew's here, which is great to see. Now Andrew's coming on the group cruise, which is great. So let's have a look. Jerry, I've been asked this quite a few times. Have you got any tips for a pre-post cruise hotel stay in Barcelona. Now, I have mostly been staying at the Euro, no, not called Eurostars. It's oh my goodness, my mind's gone blank. Let me think. It's right at the port, and it's called the Euro. It's got like Eurostars, Euro something Marina Hotel, and it's really, really handy. Some of the ships actually dock right next to it. So if you've got a ship that's actually docked right next to you, you can literally walk out and get on the ship. That happened to me once in Seabourn. When I was there last, one of the Virgin ones was there. It's not a very long taxi ride. I mean, you could theoretically walk, it's a very long walk. It's a very simple taxi ride or Uber. Well, actually, taxi in Barcelona, you need to use a taxi. They do have sort of an Uber, but it ends up being a taxi. That's where I stay. The hotel is getting a little bit tired now, but I've also sort of been looking for others. I have stayed at others, but that's just been the best one. It's within easy walking distance of the Ramblas, which is really great, near the big statue of Columbus. There's a good sort of mall across the way with some dining options and stuff. So that is the one, and I'll try and put a link for that in as well. David, enjoying the videos. Go to Alaska, fantastic. So my Alaska videos have helped. Fraser's got a question. Having recently completed Queen Mary 2 transatlantic, I'm dying to try another. I tried Virgin last year and found the ship to be quite boring. But do you know others that do a good transatlantic? Fraser, I think you'll never find a ship or a line that does a transatlantic like Cunard and Queen Mary 2 in terms of just the what they do into, because that's what they do. They've been doing that for decades and decades and decades around how to entertain people when you're crossing the Atlantic. So there's none that's as detailed as that. You're not going to have as dense a packed and varied program as that. So obviously, if you're going on one of the kind of the bigger ships, the Royal Caribbeans, the Symphony of the Seas, those kind of ships, or the Norwegian, Viva, which I was on, that when I got off that was about to do its transatlantic. There's a lot of stuff on the ship to do because there's just so many venues and activities. Royal Caribbean have incredible entertainment. They know how to do entertainment. On transatlantic, there you would have, you're not going to want to see Hairspray more than once, or Beetlejuice more than once, or the ice skating show you might be happy to see more once or twice. But there's none that do it like Queen Mary 2 do it. It's interesting. I was thinking about I probably should be doing that. Ray R, I guess the question probably fell off because it says question. We're going on the Paul Gauguin in May, which is fantastic. Yes. So it's interesting because my video came out this week where I compare the ship and ships. And the point I was making is that they had pulled back the butlers from the entry-level suites, the Sky Suites, but they are now going to start reintroducing those. So that's really good. Ray, your question popped up. Are we going on Paul Gauguin in May? Do you have a suggestion for your top tour that we should do? So a lot of that hinges around what you like to do. So one of the things that we really, really enjoy doing, and we do them in a couple of places, like in Moorea, for example, and I think we did in Hawaii as well, is the cycle tours, because you get right into the countryside. A lot of them are, and most of those now are e-bikes. And so like in Moorea, you go right up the mountain on your e-bike, very easy to do, and great view. So the e-bike tours are fantastic because you'll cycle, they'll stop, they'll tell you some history. You might cycle, look at the pineapple plantations, which I never realized until I'd been there that pineapples grow in little bushes, not on trees, which has been embarrassing. But they'll tell you some of the history. You'll go to see some stuff. So I really enjoyed those. In Bora Bora, there is a great tour if you like snorkeling and you like water. There's a great tour combined where you go to kind of a sandbank reef where there's sharks and rays, not dangerous sharks, and that's really amazing getting in the water with those. And then you go to another spot which has the most phenomenal snorkeling, really deep, beautiful coral snorkeling. Those are the ones there. If you're very active, when you are in Moorea, you can actually, it's not a tour, but it's a thing you do yourself. It costs you not very much. You pay a little fee. It's to hike up the mountain. It takes maybe 45 minutes to hike up and 45 minutes to hike down. And at the top, it is just the most phenomenal view. And it's maybe a 10-minute, 15-minute walk from where the ship docks. Those would be those are my top tips. Oh, Zane is here, which is fantastic. So Zane is on a massive, big kind of sort of poll, probably not poll to poll way of doing it. So so I met Zane. Zane's been a follower for a while, and he's a patron and stuff, which is fantastic. And he's on this magnificent big venture. So Zane also posted they had a little bit of an incident with the ship. I guess it was very windy and big storms, and it got some damage, which he'd put some great pictures of them fixing it, and they were heading off. So that's great to hear that it's going, and thanks for joining, Zane. So that's good that I guess good old trusty Starlink must be working well. I'm really enjoying following his adventures. So it's really interesting doing this. It's a combination it's a mixture of, there was all this great kind of Antarctic stuff, and then there's going to be more exotic stuff, and so it's a great trip to follow. Janet making the point, make sure if you're using the medical team to see your GP on return home. Remember Janet telling me about the story. I guess it's very important. Point is the medical center is there to kind of stabilize and make sure you can keep going, kind of thing. So you're right. You need to kind of follow up. I think that's really good. Fraser on a follow-up. After your recent cruises on the huge Norwegian offering, do you think you'll rebook another massier ship? Fraser, I don't have any plans, certainly this year, and as I'm planning next year, to go back on the big ships. My plan was to go and revisit the big ships. So I did last year. I did MSC. I did as you write, Royal. I did Norwegian. I did Royal again this year. So I don't have any plans to do that. So it's sticking more kind of, I guess, at the moment in the kind of premium through to the kind of the luxury side. So I've got Holland America Celebrity. I've got Silver Sea Expedition at the end of the year. Next year I've got I want to try because a lot of people ask me to cover Explorer, Crystal stuff. So it's kind of and as I fill that up, in fact, one of the things I'm about to do, sort of linked to this, never say never, is one of the suggestions that I had when I was looking at the whole patron member thing is what perks people want. And one of them was a Choose a Cruise, where I'm going to be launching it this week, where patrons and members will vote on what I should do. So who knows, Fraser, you might find out of that I find myself doing those. Tony here asking about Sun Princess. I don't have any feedback. I've been following quite closely. There's been a whole bunch of people on a press trip. I mean, obviously, the key thing, I'm a skeptic. One of the things I always wait for is once you've got your real passengers on. I did see a lot of people posting in some of the Facebook groups. I follow the Facebook groups and stuff for these cruise lines. People were a little bit frustrated, feeling that even with the cancellations, the ship went too soon. Like the shows only started this week. Finally, I did see someone post a Facebook group. They're finally getting to see some of the shows. They were in rehearsals, not everything was ready. So I've had people sort of saying the ship's very nice, but it hadn't got up and running yet. So I don't have any plans to sell it. Princess did approach me around it, and I think you all know I don't go on press trip stuff, so I didn't go on that press trip that they organized. But I would like to go, and the issue is whether I do Princess or whether I wait till Star. So Star comes out next year, which is their sister ship to that. I am intrigued, and it's going to be interesting to see, but it's only really now getting into its stride. So other than people really commenting on it, very nice. There was lots of frustrations around things just not being quite right. And that comes back to the video that I'm doing, you'll see coming out next week, which is around cruises to avoid. And I do actually talk quite a lot in there about Sun Princess and some of that stuff. So watch out for that next week. Paul, interesting. So for those of you who don't know, if you own, so you talk about the Stock Perks app. What happens if you own Carnival Corporation shares, as you probably need to own 100 of shares, and the same if you own Norwegian or Royal Caribbean, and you can get onboard credit. Now, what the Carnival Corporation is, they've moved to the Stock Perks app. Now, Paul, I've seen lots of people following, because I follow a group on one of the Facebook groups I follow, which is kind of Carnival. It's Carnival shareholders, Carnival Cruise Corporation cruises, and they talk a lot about Stock Perks app. I found it really simple, and I put in for Holland America trip, my Cunard trip, my Seabourn trip, and they all came through like boom, boom, boom. What I did find, Paul, is it took a while for them to approve the submission. So I did a screen grab. On my shares, my Carnival shares, like in First Direct kind of an account. So I just did a screen grab of that, blanked out things like my account number, uploaded it, but it'd take about a week for them to approve. Once it was approved, then I quickly went in, requested all those, and they came back really, really quickly, including a Holland America one. It said you have to put in 3 weeks before. I only put in 10 days, no, about 2 weeks before, and that all of them have come through, even though in reality, I don't think I paid final balance on all of those. So they came through really, really quickly. Someone's asked me in terms of the best Alaska cruise. So in terms of best Alaska cruise, let me go, Mark. So Mark, I have a bunch of videos around Alaska. So one of the things I would recommend, but I will answer your question quickly, but one of the things I would recommend, if you go to the channel, Tips for Travelers, little search button, put Alaska, and there's a whole bunch of videos come up there. And I talk in there about the best time to go, what I think the right cruise to do is based on one's expectations and experiences, and then also around some budgeting, excursion stuff. So what I always say to people is, if you're going to Alaska for the first time, what I do sort of recommend you consider is doing a classic Inside Passage cruise. But ideally, if you possibly can, both time-wise and budget-wise, is try to do an extension which takes you into the Denali, or certainly that area, where you go and stay in one of the lodges. Now, many of the cruise lines, like Holland America Princess, own both trains and the lodges. But all the cruise lines will offer some kind of combination, because on the classic Inside Passage, you will get to see some of the important things. Particularly if you go on Princess, Holland America, Norwegian, you'll get into Glacier Bay. If you're not on those few lines, you won't get into Glacier Bay. I think some of the smaller lines do. But you will get to see some glaciers. Point, you'll get to Skagway, Juneau, and Ketchikan. They're really classic ports. So that's the most classic one. My personal favorite one, though, is a longer trip, which is the 10-nighter, which tends to go between Vancouver and either Whittier or Seward, which was more a one-way. So you tend to do, you cover some of the more northern, like the Hubbard Glacier, for example. But it's the first time, even haven't done Alaska a couple of times. I'm going again this year. I'm doing that one-way thing. It's also, sea's going to be calmer because you probably have a little bit rougher seas, particularly at the top part there. But that's what I would recommend. I dive into that a little bit more in the video, so hopefully that helps. Warren, in terms of the medical areas, this probably comes back to the question around filming and not filming. So no, partly because even when we did the behind-the-scenes tours, we weren't allowed to take any video. So it's much harder to ask. I probably should ask at some point around whether anyone would let me ever do any B-roll in that. Jake, doing an 18-day Norwegian Spirit Trans-Pacific cruise in May. Does my NCL cabin TVs have HDMI ports to plug in my video game? Jake, I do not know the answer for Norwegian Spirit specifically. One of the biggest criticisms or complaints, though, to your point, that people have is that many of the televisions in cruise cabins do not have HDMI ports to plug in things like games, or some people want to be able to plug in so they can, I guess, if they've got movies stripped or whatever on their laptops. So I don't know. What I would do is I would probably, a little bit like I was saying, I would probably, if you have the dates of your cruise, what I would do is I would either go into Cruise Critic, into the Norwegian boards in there, if there's one specific Norwegian Spirit, and ask the question. Or I would look for a Facebook group for Norwegian, particularly Norwegian Spirit, and ask in there. Or the other thing I would do is, again on Cruise Critic, is look, if you go to roll call at the top there, look for your specific cruise. So input the date of your cruise very specifically, and ask people. Because the great thing about, particularly with the roll call on those boards, is there's often people who are on board or have the same issue, and you will get an answer to that. But you're absolutely right to, if you really want to be able to play, that's one of the biggest criticisms they don't have. And I've actually started to look a little bit more for HDMI. I've never really used it on trips because I've become aware more. So hopefully that helps. One asked me, do I ever talk about how to accumulate shipboard credits? I'm not quite sure. Do you mean in terms of onboard credits, Warren? Maybe just clarify that a bit. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, if you mean in terms of getting onboard credit, that is really, you can't really roll it over. That's the problem with that. It's a once-off, and it's normally a promotional thing. This is an interesting one. Echo Bravo, the nice sort of Concorde there. Even more fancy little bracket. I like the little fancy bracket. On the Oceania cruise you just completed, do you feel like you lost some of the benefits of a smaller ship by only stopping at busy ports instead of... Yes, absolutely. I mean, I went on that trip, Echo Bravo, because I specifically wanted to see vistas. So, and just the way that my schedule was and all the other cruises that I'd booked, I then had a period of time, a period of time, when I wanted to do vistas. So I was then really driven around what is Vista doing at that point in time. But you're absolutely right. We went to ports which were very classic, big ship, not particularly interesting. I mean, they're fine as ports, but the point of going on a smaller ship is you're often going for destination. So this really wasn't about the destination. So yes, if I was doing, like, I'm actually looking at some Oceania stuff in 25, and you're right, I'm looking at even going on even the smaller ship, the Regatta, because it calls into these, it's in Asia, it calls on much more exotic little ports that just even the bigger ships in Asia don't do. So yes, I think it's a really good point. Why to the question is, there are currently none that stop. They all pulled all of the schedules once after the October and the war kind of that broke out in Gaza, and their ships have pulled all of those. So there used to be quite a lot of cruise lines across a wide range of cruises, from resort kind of ships, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, right up to your ultra luxury Seabourns and stuff. So whatever your budget or interest was, but they are all pulled. And I guess we don't know, the same as heading around the whole Suez Canal, Middle East, which I really wanted to do with the Houthi rebels. That's all pulled. I know a lot of cruise lines are still showing those heading to 2025. I'm not booking them because I'm not sure that's going to happen. So I don't want to book something that's going to get cancelled or moved around. So no, but they were, and I just don't know when it's going to be. Bob and Holly here, which is great. Bob and Holly joining on the group cruise, which is very exciting indeed. Yes, Sci-Fi Monkey saying the 3 to 4 day cruises all seem to be stag and hen do's, which is absolutely. Nacor88, have you done one of those luxury yacht cruises like the Emerald, the Ritz-Carlton, the Scenic? I haven't, and I do want to do one, and I do get asked a lot around doing one. I always just look at them, and they are so expensive. And I just look at them and I go, oh my goodness, do I really want to do that? So I know I often cover sort of suites and some of the premium lines, but I just look at them and I go, oh my goodness, I could be doing like something else for this. For me, it's, I guess everyone has their break point. And it's just, I do need to do those. And I would like to do those. I was looking, at both Emerald, Scenic, and Ritz-Carlton. I was looking at it, and they just are so crazy expensive. So I am going to, I will do one. One day, I'm sure I will succumb to one. I did consider kind of combining two at one time when I was thinking of going back to Antarctica, and I looked at one of the Scenic Eclipse. But then I decided actually I didn't like some of the reviews there. I didn't want to risk spending so much money to go to Antarctica and not being happy with the ship. I've since seen some stuff which made me feel maybe I should have. So it's a long way to answer your question. I would like to do, but to me, they are so expensive. And also, to be honest, I wonder when I also often look, which probably I often look with what do I think people will want to watch on the channel, and I wonder whether that would do well or not. It might do well just because it is so quirky and different. Hi there, Ken Goes Cruising, which is good to see here with their new Zooty logo. I know you're a fan of afternoon tea. Have you noticed how some cruise lines are reducing the choice of real tea, afternoon tea, in favor of fruit teas and alike? So I haven't seen that as much, actually. That's an interesting. I'll keep an eye out for that. I've seen. No, I haven't really seen that. So I don't know whether that's also, is that based on some of your recent experiences, I guess, with Fred Olsen and stuff. But I haven't really seen that. But maybe because the last couple of lines have been on either haven't done it at all, or have been on lines like Oceania, which is kind of they have a massive big box with all your twinings, everything in decaf Earl Grey, normal Earl Grey and stuff. So I haven't seen that. But no, but I will definitely keep an eye out. It's going to be interesting actually, because we're heading on America, obviously, with the next group cruise coming up. Afternoon tea is a thing there, although one of the chats we had last night, some people were just back off, was it Koningsdam, and they were kind of disappointed with afternoon tea on America. So we will see. Ron, I don't use a cashback credit card. I use a credit card that gets air miles points, so I can use it for my flights, is what I do. KB in the UK. Talking about obviously thinking of booking a south coastal cruise, Sydney to Perth. Is the sea rough around that area? So in my understanding, KB, and I'm not an expert, but my understanding is that it's more the Tasman area. So it's once you're heading more the other way, if you're heading to New Zealand. I don't remember, because I did sail from New Zealand. We went round Auckland, Wellington, Misty Fjords is Alaska, the fjords thing, and then we went that way. And I don't remember the sea being particularly rough at all. But a lot of people talk about it being rough. Chris Frame talks about it. Kate, who's based in Australia, was on the Captain Zoom call last night, was talking about those rough seas, 7-meter waves or something like that. But no, that Sydney to Perth, I think, is less. So it's more once you head down that Tasman, and that way is my understanding of it. But I might be wrong if this with this time, so we don't get a lot of Australians in. But I will double check. I will double check that. Let's have a look. Sarge, good to see you here, Sarge. I don't know if you've been here before. I don't remember seeing you before, but maybe you have. Anyway, question. Excuse me. My wife and I are in our mid-50s and are about to book our first river cruise on the Danube on Emerald. What are your current feelings on the line? So I had a great time on Emerald. So Emerald is the same company as Scenic Group. So ultimately an Australian group. So Scenic, they sort of see as their sort of 5-star product, I guess. Emerald is sort of like a 4-star product if you're sort of equating to hotels. So it's still pretty upmarket. They have now, many of the ships have the little plunge pool at the back, and which becomes a cinema at night. They do tend to be a bit more youthful, kind of, although river cruising tends to be a little bit older generally. They do have a slightly more active excursions, so that's probably quite good. Food, I remember being particularly good. I had a great time on Emerald. I've only been on them once. I did a 10-nighter, or maybe it was a 12-nighter, which went from Bucharest to Budapest. Obviously, you don't get on Budapest, you have to go down to the Danube there. But I really enjoyed it. So Emerald, Avalon are very similar kind of things. So I think you should have. I think you should have a great time. CFAM from Japan, fantastic. Fraser asking why he asked around. It was boring. Let's have a look. So yes, it was interesting that Virgin. It's interesting because Virgin, you imagine, is full on, and it was interesting following Fraser's point about it just became very kind of repetitive. So Sherry, I have seen this and I haven't. I need to explore this a little bit more. So for those who know what Sherry's asking, and it's good to see you again, Sherry, is what do you think about America and Delta's announcement not to give frequent flyer miles after the 1st of May, unless you book with them direct? So the point being that you don't get your frequent flyer miles if you're booking through the cruise line. Now I need to explore this a bit more, and I haven't seen the announcements. I guess because we've seen less announcements this side of the pond. It's not the case on BA, but it's kind of interesting because what we've seen, as you probably know, is if you book hotels not through a travel agent, like if I book a hotel through Sarah, a travel agent Sarah, or we book it through the hotel, I don't get the air miles and I don't get the hotel miles. So it's kind of aligning a little bit with what the hotel industry is already doing. So I need to explore this a bit more. So I think it's like, for me, it would mean I would switch to booking my flights direct, which I guess is perhaps what they want to do, because obviously they are discounting fares. Obviously, we're going to have to balance and see the difference in fares. The downside with it, Cherry, certainly is what I normally found, and I don't know if that's your experience across in the US, is I normally find if I'm booking if I book the say BA fare, If I'm booking it directly at their cheapest fare, you have to pay in full at the time, and they're either non-refundable or lots and lots of conditions to them. Normally what I find if I'm booking it through the cruise line is the fare's normally that lower fare, but I only have to pay it when I'm paying my final balance. And it only gets officially ticketed later. So so it would definitely seem they're obviously getting kind of more of a discount. So I assume that's the issue. BA, it's not the case, but it's very, very disappointing because certainly, as I mentioned earlier, the frequent flyer miles are really important. We use this for holidays and all sorts of stuff. But it does change behavior. So for example, I generally don't book my hotels now unless it's very specific, linked to the cruise. So for example, a lot of my cruises coming up, and if I give you an example, is I stay a lot of the Intercontinental because I have ambassador status at Intercontinental, which is an amazing thing. If you go with Intercontinental, you pay it's $200 a year or £200 a year, but you get a guaranteed 4 o'clock checkout, guaranteed. You get always an upgrade and all sorts of other kind of perks. So what I found is that ends up, although Intercontinental is more expensive, I'm saving a lot of money because I can get a 4 o'clock checkout, whereas normally I would be booking an extra night if I've got like an 11 o'clock a night flight. But what I now do is because I don't get points and stuff, is I've stopped booking hotels and I book them now myself. So I've just been doing that recently with a lot of flights I'm doing. So it will change behavior. So but there again, hotels you have more flexibility with. So so that's the thing. So I need to follow this up because that's I saw the discussion on that breaking. So that'll be very disappointing. David asking a question around Regent. How is it different from the lower cruise lines? Food that much better? So David, I really like Regent a lot. So Regent competes with Silversea, Seabourn, the new, I guess, Explorer Journeys. I guess you could argue that the Ritz-Carlton smaller yachts are sort of competing with that. And the next level down from that, if you like, is the luxury small ships. So your Oceania, Azamara, Windstar, Viking. Then you have what's called premium. So your Celebrity, P&Os, I guess, in there, although they're becoming a little bit more mass. Holland America, Princess, Virgin are in there. Then you've got your kind of mass resorts, so your big mega ships. And it's quite a complicated way of explaining, but basically Regent, you're going to get way more inclusions. The fare's way higher, but you get dramatically more inclusions. So you get airfare, and depending on which, like in the UK, it tends to be economy flights. If you book in the US, it's more business class. You get transfers, you get pre-stay hotel, you get all your excursions, you get all your drink included, you get gratuities included, etc. Special dining included, all that stuff. Whereas if you go to the next level, when you go to others, you start paying for gratuities, you pay for drinks packages. So it's around the level of inclusions. Theoretically, your guest ratios, so the number of crew to passenger, it's sort of like almost a 1-to-1. So your service is much higher. So it's a smaller ship, so you have much fewer passengers. You're talking like 700 or something passengers versus maybe anything up to 5,000 passengers. So it is very much different. And I think if you heard the discussion earlier, food is generally better in my view. Yes. I do have a video, and I'm thinking of updating recently, getting into more of that discussion. So if people think it'll be good to get more into explain the different categories and the differences, let me know. I haven't been on Riviera, and I've seen a few other vloggers and stuff been on Riviera, but I haven't been on those. My understanding, what I've seen, is they're pretty good value, but no, I don't know a lot. I don't know a lot about them, unfortunately. No. So I too, we're long-time cruisers, so I assume ocean cruisers want to try river cruising for the first time. Which river cruise would you recommend as our first? So I assume you're talking European river cruising, so I'll focus on European river cruising. And I would recommend looking at the Danube or the Rhine. They're the two classic ones. I actually, because I get asked this question a lot, I've actually pulled together, on the process of pulling together, all the river cruise questions that I've been asked, and working on a blog post that will probably come out in the next week or two, because I get asked a lot around what's the best river, what's the best cruise line, river cruise line, and stuff around cruise. So I pulled all the actual answers I've done on the last year. I've stripped all those out and done those. But I would recommend look at the Danube, look at the Rhine. If you're talking European river cruising, in terms of global river cruising, the Mekong is just amazing, as is the Nile. Kevin asking the question: we just booked Silver Muse in South Africa. How rough did you find the seas? It wasn't too rough actually when we went round. It wasn't too rough at all actually. It was pretty bouncy, heading between sort of coming down from Namibia to Cape Town was pretty bouncy. I'm probably a bad judge because I actually like rough seas, so I'm probably really bad. It was pretty bumpy. It wasn't the bumpiest I've been. Quite a few people did say they felt a bit queasy. So I would just have your little, your seasick, whatever your little remedy is. It wasn't like you have these stories about being absolutely horrendous. I would say Cape Horn was rougher, definitely. I would say. Okay, let's have a look. Just a reminder, if you write the word question so I don't miss your question. Let's have a look. So, yeah, Eurostars Grand Marina. Thank you very much. Eurostars Grand Marina. That was the. So there's some other good suggestions. Some good recommendations on Barcelona. Just a reminder, write the word question so I don't miss your question. I haven't missed your question here. R.A. Ekmark. Taking my first voyage from Rome to Athens next week. Fantastic. That's a great itinerary. On the Windstar Legend. Any recommendations for packing? It looks really casual. So yes, it is pretty casual on Windstar. So they sort of follow that slightly nebulous country casuals kind of thing. So as a guy, sort of slacks, I guess they're called. Polo shirt is pretty fine. So equivalent from a lady's perspective, kind of a little sort of dress or slacks or a blouse kind of is fine. Even on their smarter nights, people don't really get particularly dressed up. It is pretty casual. It's certainly way more casual than if you're going on an Azamara. Certainly, definitely more casual than on Oceania. So it is pretty casual. It's sort of interesting. I would say on Windstar, people are probably more comfortable kind of doing carry-on, if you like, luggage. I mean, people see the Windstar experience as very relaxed. They're much more interested in the destination. They're not worried about dressing up, and the ship doesn't have a very dress-up feel. So I would basically, just have some smart-ish clothes, as if you're just popping out to a local restaurant or something, and and if you want to dress up, of course you can dress up. No one's going to tell you if it's interesting, but it is pretty casual. It's one of the more kind of casual of that sort of grouping. Jack, hi there. Good to see you, Jack. And it has a super chat. I think that's what it's called. Have you ever done or planned to do a best lists of just boarding, cabins, meals, staff, debarking of the different cruise lines? Have you done a best list of just boarding, cabins, meals, staff? Well, it's interesting you ask that, Jack, because I keep starting this sort of grid, and I think that's what you're talking around. Maybe I need to talk to you separately offline about what you mean, but I have sort of started a grid, which links back to the early thing I was talking about, which is around kind of the differences, sort of a grid which will talk about some of the differences and stuff. So I think that's what you mean, but maybe I'll follow up with you more offline, I guess, and let me understand if I'm understanding it correctly, because it's one of the things that keeps popping up, which is why I'm really intrigued to find out what you mean. Is it keeps popping up on my to-do list around doing this, because I feel like it could be a good resource, and maybe you've got some great ideas there on what should be on that grid, because at the moment it started very much around the key differences, but it didn't get into that much detail. So to Warren's point, Regent in the UK does not include business on international. So it's very interesting because I have, both when I went to Japan and also Mark and I have a Regent trip booked for the end of this year. And out of the UK, they include economy for long haul, but ironically and bizarrely, they include business if you're doing a European cruise. But I know that's different in the US where they include business air, business international. And it's I even got Sarah to go and quadruple check that because that's what I that's what I saw. And it's interesting because people often pick me up on that in my region videos. In the story, it's really interesting how they differ, and it's really hard to work out why they do that. Maybe it's something to do with the deals or something that they do. Let's have a look. I jumped a bit down because I answered one of the. Let's have a look. Sorry, I did jump down to do Jack's question. So let me go back. So I don't want to make sure that I haven't left out any questions before I jump back down to the bottom. We've got rough seas. We've done rough seas, all the Barcelona questions. I haven't booked on Aqua. I mean, for those who don't know, Aqua is a third of the Prima class. But what's interesting is they're taking off the go-karts and they're putting in a kind of a water ride slide. So I haven't done that. Warren asking, I've been to the planetarium on Cunard. Yes, I have. It's pretty good. I feel it's a little bit overrated, to be honest. But it's fine. I feel it's more gimmicky. I feel it's actually probably a bit dated. I think this show's a bit dated, but it's worth going to, yes. Connie giving me a shout out for this week's video, the ship and ship video. So thanks for, it's a good excuse for me to then talk a bit about the ship and ship. So this week's video is, I compare the 5 main ship within a ships. And I talk about which I think is best, which I think is the worst. Let's do this one. Anyone ever disembark Southampton and take the high-speed train to Paris? It looks like we need to get a taxi from the port to the train to Waterloo transfer. Yes, you've got it absolutely right. I mean, you either could, of course, or get a transfer directly to St Pancras is the other way of doing it. But obviously, that would be a way more expensive way. Transferring from Waterloo to St Pancras is not massively easy, but probably not too bad actually, because you could probably do Northern Line and stuff. So, but yes, you've got the exact right. I mean, years ago, Eurostar actually used to go out of Waterloo when they first opened until they built the faster leg. Well, we have churned out of time, so let me. A couple of you asked me if I've been to Ocean Quay, the MSC. I haven't been there, so let's have a look. I know we're running over time, but let's have a quick look. I'll do a quick one here. Mark, this is an easy one to ask. Any plans to book on Queen Anne? Yes. I'm on Queen Anne in May. Their second cruise they're doing. First cruise is their sort of maiden voyage, which is a 7-nighter to Lisbon and back. And I'm booked on the next cruise. Now that is a little bit closer to launching than I normally like to go. But as you know, they had cancelled loads of things, reset up. And that also worked with when Mark could come with me because he's a big Cunard fan. So yes, so I'm going in May. So there will be some stuff coming out from that. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. As I said, there will be a live stream next week on Sunday in the run-up to the group cruise. I always look at all the questions that you've asked, see if there's other ways that I can answer them. I really appreciate it. If you want more of me, go and watch that video and just have a great rest of your weekend.